My brother stole my inheritance while I worked 60-hour weeks, so I took his job, exposed his lies, and left him begging for forgiveness. I'm a 26-year-old guy who's always been the responsible one, the one who wakes before sunrise and comes home long after the streetlights flicker on, grinding through brutal 60-hour weeks while my older brother floats through life on charm, excuses, and half-hearted ambition. Every time I dragged my exhausted body through our front door, my mother would barely look up and mutter, "You're strong. You can handle it," while my father smiled proudly at my brother and said, "He's got potential. He just needs time." Hearing that over and over made something hollow settle inside my chest, a quiet ache I learned to carry without complaint. I kept telling myself this was what love looked like: sacrifice, silence, endurance, even when my hands ached. My back throbbed, and my mind felt like it was unraveling, thread by thread. My brother would laugh, clap me on the shoulder and say, "Relax, man, you're too serious," like my exhaustion was a personality flaw instead of years of being overworked and overlooked. The house always smelled of reheated leftovers and stale coffee, the air heavy with the unspoken understanding that I was expected to provide and never question. What kept me going was my grandfather's promise. Before he passed, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "That piece of land by the orchard will always be yours," and I held on to those words like gospel. I pictured building a small home there, somewhere peaceful, somewhere that finally felt like mine. But lately, I overheard hushed conversations in the hallway. My mother saying, "Your brother's struggling more," and my father sighing, "He deserves support too." When I tried to defend myself, my brother's voice turned smooth and wounded. "Why are you making this a competition?" he said quietly, eyes full of false sincerity, while my parents stared at me like I was the selfish one. I swallowed every protest, every flash of anger, desperate not to become the problem they already seemed to see in me. Still, late at night, lying awake with the hum of the refrigerator bleeding through the walls, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, something I wasn't meant to hear, and the silence felt heavier than ever. I'm a 26-year-old guy who started noticing how my older brother suddenly became a permanent shadow beside my parents, whispering in corners and sharing quiet laughs that stopped the second I walked into the room. It felt like stepping into a space where the air shifted, thick with secrets I wasn't meant to hear. My mother's voice would soften around him. "He's been opening up lately," she'd say, while my father nodded approvingly like this was some breakthrough moment. Inside, a slow panic twisted through me, the kind that makes you feel like you're losing ground without ever seeing the edge. I tried to ignore it, burying myself deeper into work, but the distance at home grew heavier. One night, as the old fan rattled overhead and the dim kitchen light flickered, I overheard my brother saying, "He's barely ever here anymore. He doesn't really care about this family," his tone smooth and calculated. My father sighed in agreement. "He's too independent. Maybe he doesn't need us like you do." Their words slammed into my chest like a quiet betrayal, even though I stood frozen, invisible in the hallway. When I finally spoke up, my mother frowned. "We're just worried about him," she said, gesturing toward my brother, who lowered his eyes and murmured, "I'm only trying to help." Man, the way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was wrapping poison in kindness. I felt my worth shrink, my sacrifices suddenly feeling small and suspicious. The house felt colder, the walls closer, every familiar smell now tainted with discomfort. Even the creak of the floorboards felt like an accusation as I passed by, holding in questions that clawed at my throat. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, that exhaustion had twisted my perspective, but the tension was becoming impossible to ignore. Late that evening, I caught my mother slipping a folder into her bag as my brother watched his expression calm, almost satisfied. When she noticed me standing there, she snapped, "It's nothing you need to worry about." And the way they both avoided my eyes sent a sharp wave of dread through me, because, deep down, I knew whatever was happening behind closed doors had already begun writing my future without me, and I was just starting to realize how far out I'd been pushed. I'm a 26-year-old guy who never meant to go digging through anything that wasn't mine. But that afternoon felt different, like the house itself was holding its breath. My mother had asked me to grab an old insurance file from the study, and as I sifted through dusty folders that smelled faintly of paper and polish, My eyes caught on something that didn't belong. A crisp envelope marked with legal stamps and my grandfather's name. My hands trembled as I pulled it free, a slow unease creeping into my chest. Inside were copies of official documents, and as I scanned the lines, my stomach dropped. My brother's name sat neatly typed where mine had always been promised. Property transfers, revised agreements, my future reduced to ink I had never approved. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out the ticking clock on the wall. "This has to be a mistake," I whispered, my voice barely more than air, when I stepped into the living room holding the papers. Both my parents looked up too quickly, like they already knew what I'd found. "Why is his name on my inheritance?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother's expression tightened. "You shouldn't have been looking at that," she snapped, her tone sharp and defensive. My brother leaned back on the couch, arms crossed. "You're overreacting," he said calmly, almost amused. "It's just paperwork adjustments." "Adjustments," I repeated, my chest burning. "Grandpa promised this to me. You all knew that." My father's voice dropped, heavy and disappointed. "Don't start causing drama over technicalities. We made a decision as a family." The word family tasted bitter in my mouth, like rust. My brother sighed theatrically. "Why are you trying to tear us apart?" "You're acting selfish right now," he murmured, eyes full of rehearsed concern. And my mother nodded, as if he'd spoken some deep truth. The way they framed me as the villain in my own betrayal made my vision blur. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with denial and quiet accusation. My hands clenched around the crumpled papers, the edges biting into my skin as my brother glanced at me with a faint, knowing smirk. And in that moment, a cold realization settled in my bones. This wasn't confusion or miscommunication. This was something they had planned long before I ever walked into that room. I'm a 26-year-old guy who started doubting his own reflection, because the more I tried to fight what was happening, the more my family made it feel like I was losing my mind. Every sentence out of my mouth was twisted into proof that I was unstable or too emotional. My mother started saying things like, "You've been acting different lately," while my father shook his head and added, "This stress from work is clearly affecting your judgment." Their voices weren't loud, just calm enough to make me question myself. The worst part was how icily my brother slipped into the role of peacemaker. "I'm just worried about him," he told them gently, with that same polished tone that made everyone believe he cared. Then he'd look at me and murmur, "You don't want to ruin the family over money, right?" And suddenly, I felt guilt instead of anger. Like my pain was an inconvenience everyone wished would disappear. The house felt heavier every day. The warm, familiar sense of home were now mixed with stale tension. And even the soft creak of the stairs felt like judgment beneath my feet. I found myself hesitating before speaking, second-guessing every thought. Was I really exaggerating? Was I being ungrateful? The questions looped in my head until sleep felt impossible. One night, as I tried to explain how hurt I felt, my father cut me off. "You should be proud of your brother stepping up," he said sharply. "Not everyone handles responsibility like you, and that's okay." The unfairness hit me like a silent slap. "So my years of work mean nothing?" I asked quietly. My mother sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she whispered. Like I was the problem, I began noticing subtle shifts, my brother answering questions for me, decisions being made without my input, my presence slowly fading from family plans. Even laughter felt forced now, like a performance I wasn't invited to understand. Late one evening, as I walked past my brother's room, I heard his low voice through the half-closed door saying, "He'll give up eventually. He always does." Followed by a soft chuckle that sent a chill through my spine, and standing there in the dim hallway, heart racing, I realized they weren't just silencing me anymore. They were waiting for me to break. I'm a 26-year-old guy who thought I'd already seen the worst of it, until the truth hit me in a way that made my stomach turn cold. It happened on a rain-soaked afternoon, when the sky hung low and gray, the kind of day that feels heavy even before anything goes wrong. I was leaving work early, my mind still looping over everything that had happened, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You deserve to know what they did." Attached was a scanned email chain between my brother and our family lawyer. My hands shook as I read every line. My brother wasn't just benefiting from a coincidence, He had paid the lawyer to fast-track the inheritance transfer and rewrite the terms, while I was drowning in overtime shifts. Even worse, the emails showed my parents agreeing to it, signing off on everything with calm approval. "He'll be fine. He always survives," my mother had written. "This gives his brother stability," my father added. The words burned into me, every sentence cracking something deep inside my chest when I stormed home. The air felt sharp and electric. "You bribed the lawyer," I demanded, holding my phone out like proof of a crime scene. My brother barely flinched. He leaned back in his chair, lips curling slightly. "I just secured what I deserved," he said smoothly. "You're too busy with your little job to understand real strategy." My pulse roared in my ears. My mother's voice wavered, but not with guilt. "We made a practical choice," she insisted. "You're strong. You always bounce back." I stared at her, the woman who raised me, and whispered, "So my loyalty meant nothing." She looked away. My father folded his arms. "Stop making this emotional," he muttered, as if betrayal was a spreadsheet problem. The room felt suffocating. The smell of damp clothes and cold air clinging to my skin as every realization settled. This wasn't neglect. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was deliberate, calculated, planned, with quiet confidence that I wouldn't fight back. My brother's eyes met mine, unwavering, and he murmured, "You should be thanking me. I'm the one who stepped up." And as those words sunk in, I felt a new kind of clarity forming beneath the shock. A dangerous calm I didn't recognize yet. I'm a 26-year-old guy who stopped raising his voice the moment I realized anger was exactly what they wanted from me. Something inside quietly shifted after that confrontation, like a switch flicked from chaos to cold awareness. I stopped pleading. I stopped explaining. I just started watching the way my brother strutted around the house with newfound arrogance, the way my parents avoided my eyes like I was a ghost they didn't know how to bury. "You're being unusually calm," my brother commented one evening, his tone laced with suspicion. "Maybe he's finally accepting reality," my father replied, and my mother hummed in faint agreement. Inside, though, my thoughts were sharper than ever, slicing through every memory, every transaction, every lie they thought I'd swallowed. I began pulling old bank records, messages, photos, copies of documents I'd once kept out of blind trust. Each detail felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that night. The glow of my phone lit up the cramped silence of my room as I gathered proof of the manipulation, the promises, the sudden legal changes. My hands moved with quiet precision, but my chest throbbed with a familiar ache. "They really did this to you," a close friend muttered over a hushed call. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, and they think I'm done," I whispered back, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the dark window. Downstairs, laughter echoed from the living room, my brother's voice loud and satisfied. "He'll come around," he scoffed. "He always does." Every word fueled something dark and focused within me, a resolve that no longer felt fragile, just dangerous and controlled. I started noticing his carelessness. Unlocked drawers, careless emails left open on shared devices, whispered late-night calls that suddenly ended when I passed by. He believed my silence meant surrender, and that belief became his blind spot. One night, as I scrolled through another thread of incriminating correspondence, a message popped up from an unfamiliar contact. "Your brother isn't as untouchable as he thinks. There's more you don't know yet." My fingers froze above the screen, heart tightening again, not with fear this time, but anticipation, because whatever he'd hidden from me wasn't just about the inheritance, and I could feel it waiting, lurking just beyond the surface. I'm a 26-year-old guy who finally clicked on that anonymous message, my heart pounding harder than it had through any confrontation so far. The screen filled with details that made my breath hitch. My brother didn't just manipulate our family, he'd built his entire successful life on lies. The sender, who refused to reveal their name, claimed to work in the same company as him and said he's not qualified for the position he holds. None of it is real. At first, disbelief flooded me, but then more messages followed, screenshots of internal emails, whispers of falsified credentials, and a resume version that never existed in reality. I stared at my phone as the dull hum of my ceiling fan mixed with the hollow echo of my thoughts. "He lied to get that job," I murmured to myself, a bitter half-laugh slipping past my lips. All this time while I was breaking my back to stay afloat. He'd created a fantasy career with polished deception. The next day, as he strutted into the kitchen, adjusting his expensive watch, he grinned at me. "Big meeting today," he said proudly. "You wouldn't understand corporate life, though." My stomach twisted as his arrogance brushed against everything I'd just learned. "You always think you deserve the best," I replied quietly. He scoffed, "Because I earn it." Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. He bribed someone inside HR to push his promotion through. If they find out, he's finished. My chest tightened, a strange mix of dread and vindication twisting through me. Was this my chance? The thought scared me as much as it fueled me. Still, I knew exposing him wouldn't just destroy his fake success. It would rip open every lie he'd hidden behind confidence and charm. A memory flashed in my mind, my parents beaming as he boasted about his executive role, my mother whispering how proud she was of him. The unfairness burned, but beneath it rose something sharper, colder, more deliberate. That night, as rain tapped against my window and the air smelled faintly of damp concrete, I stared at the growing collection of evidence on my screen. Each detail felt like a ticking fuse leading toward something explosive. And, as another message appeared, "There's still more you don't know," a slow, unsettling chill crept down my spine, because I could tell whatever was coming next would change everything. I'm a 26-year-old guy who thought knowing the truth would make me stronger. But instead, it crushed whatever fragile balance I had left. The weight of everything. My parents' quiet betrayal pressed down until even breathing felt like work. That night, the unknown sender stopped replying, leaving me alone with a storm of proof and nowhere to put the pain. The room felt colder than usual, the faint smell of dust and old wood mixing with the stale air of sleepless hours. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the cracked screen of my phone, scrolling through memories that suddenly felt like mockery. Every photo of family dinners, every forced smile beside my brother, twisted inside me like broken glass. "Maybe they're right," I whispered, my voice hollow. "Maybe I really don't matter." The thought scared me, but it also felt dangerously real. Downstairs, I heard them laughing. My brother's confident voice carried through the vents. "He's over it. Trust me," he said casually. "He always needs time to sulk." My mother chuckled softly. "You've handled this so well," she told him, pride warming her tone. The sound tore through me, and suddenly the walls felt like they were closing in. Squeezing the air from my lungs, I stumbled outside into the cool night. The damp ground, squelching under my shoes, as a light drizzle, clung to my hair and skin. The streetlights blurred, reflecting off the wet pavement like distant broken stars. My chest ached, a deep, suffocating weight settling where hope used to live. "I gave you everything," I muttered into the dark, voice shaking. All of it. For the first time, I questioned whether fighting was even worth it, whether disappearing would hurt less than staying strong. I felt small, forgotten, like a background character in my own life. Even the memories of my grandfather's promise felt faint, like a dream I'd imagined to survive. As I leaned against the cold metal railing, my phone buzzed again, not from the anonymous source, but from my brother. "Stop being dramatic. You'll get over it," my vision blurred, hands trembling, and I realized this wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was the moment I'd never sunk lower than 9, and I didn't know if I had the strength left to climb back up. I'm a 26-year-old guy who woke up the next morning feeling hollow, but strangely focused. Like everything inside me had gone quiet except one sharp, deliberate thought. If I was already broken, then I had nothing left to lose. The gray light creeping through my curtains felt cold and unforgiving, and the hum of traffic outside sounded distant, almost unreal. My phone rested heavy in my hand, the evidence staring back at me like a silent ultimatum. My friend murmured over the phone later that afternoon, his voice careful, like I might shatter. "I don't think they realize what they've done," I replied quietly, "and they're about to—" Saying it out loud felt strange, almost dangerous, but it also steadied me. For the first time in weeks, my breathing slowed instead of spiraled. I sat at my desk, organizing every screenshot, every email, every record of my brother's fabricated credentials and suspicious promotions. The faint smell of dust and cold coffee filled the room as I drafted a formal report to his company's compliance department, my fingers moving with a calm precision that surprised even me. "This is risky," my friend warned, his voice tense. "So was stealing my life," I answered, staring at the blinking cursor. Downstairs, my brother's laughter echoed again, careless and obnoxious. "Relax," he bragged to my parents. "I'm untouchable." My jaw tightened, a thin smile forming as I clicked attach on the final piece of proof. Each tap of the keyboard felt like reclaiming a fragment of dignity he'd tried to erase. The air in my room felt heavy, thick with anticipation and quiet resolve. Before hitting send, I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding, mind replaying every memory of loyalty, sacrifice, and betrayal. Was I ready to watch everything collapse, not just for him, but for the illusion of my entire family? My phone vibrated again. A message from the anonymous source flashed across the screen. "They've started asking questions already. You're closer than you think." My hand froze mid-air, pulse thundering in my ears as the realization settled in. Once this went through, there would be no turning back, and the fallout would be impossible to escape. I'm a 26-year-old guy who pressed send and felt the world tilt in the quietest, most terrifying way possible. The moment the confirmation email from the compliance department landed in my inbox, my stomach twisted, not with regret, but with a strange electric tension. It was done. The lie had been released into the system, and all I could do now was wait while it hunted him down. At dinner that night, everything felt surreal. The soft clink of cutlery against plates, the warm smell of spices, my brother's loud voice bragging about his upcoming projects. It all felt like a performance I'd already seen through. "They're considering me for another promotion," he announced, grinning. My mother beamed proudly. "I told you he's special," she said, squeezing his arm. I forced a tight smile, my heart thudding as I murmured, "Yeah, seems like things are moving fast." His phone buzzed mid-laugh. He glanced at the screen, frowning slightly before clearing his throat. "Probably just work nonsense," he scoffed, waving it off. But I noticed the stiffness in his shoulders. A flicker of unease crept into his confidence, subtle but unmistakable. My father leaned toward him. "Everything all right?" he asked, and my brother's jaw tightened. Yeah. Just some internal check." Later that evening, raised voices echoed from the hallway as my brother stepped outside to take another call. "What do you mean they're reviewing my history?" he snapped under his breath, pacing. "This is a miscommunication." The rain began tapping against the windows, soft but persistent. Like everything finally starting to crack. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Investigation officially opened. They're moving faster than expected. I swallowed, the warmth of the room suddenly replaced by a cold anticipation crawling up my spine. My brother walked back inside, face pale, his eyes darting briefly toward me. "What's going on?" my mother pressed. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Just corporate nonsense." But the way his voice shook told a different story. And as he forced another smile, I realized the walls he'd built around himself were beginning to tremble, and what was coming next wouldn't stay quiet for long. I'm a 26-year-old guy who watched the illusion finally shatter. The morning my brother stumbled into the house with a face drained of color, rain clinging to his jacket and hands, trembling like he didn't recognize his own body anymore. The air smelled sharp and metallic, like a storm had cracked open right inside our living room. He wouldn't meet my eyes as he whispered to our parents. "They suspended me pending investigation," his voice breaking on the last word. My mother gasped softly, fingers flying to her mouth, while my father stood frozen, stunned by a reality he never thought would touch his golden child. I felt something cold and steady settle in my chest. Not joy, not relief, just the heavy calm of consequences finally catching up. My brother turned to me, eyes glossy and wild. "Don't just stand there," he pleaded, voice cracking louder. "You know, this is a misunderstanding, right? Say something." I swallowed hard, the taste of bitterness coating my tongue. "You told them I didn't care about this family?" I said quietly, every word trembling with restrained fury. He wiped his face, pacing like a trapped animal. "I was trying to survive," he shot back. "I didn't think it would go this far." My parents turned to me then, their eyes suddenly soft with regret that felt too late to touch. "Please," my mother whispered, her voice shaking, "just help him explain this." The room felt smaller with every breath, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the suffocating silence. My brother stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were suddenly allies again. "You know, I'm not perfect, but I never meant to hurt." You, he murmured, reaching out like apology could erase years of calculated betrayal. I could hear the rain drumming against the windows, see the desperation in his eyes as he whispered, "Just tell them you believe me." My chest tightened as my phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number flashing across the screen, reading only 2 words that made my breath hitch. I'm a 26-year-old guy who stared down at my phone as those 2 words glowed on the screen. We know. My pulse slowed instead of racing, a strange calm washing over me, like the quiet after a storm. My brother's desperate breathing filled the room, his hands still hovering in the air as if I owed him salvation. "Tell them you believe me," he repeated, voice quivering. I finally looked up, meeting his eyes, and felt the weight of every sleepless night. Every sacrifice, every silenced scream settle into something firm and unbreakable. "I do believe." "You," I said slowly, the words landing like measured footsteps. "I believe you built everything on lies." The room fell silent, the soft ticking of the clock suddenly deafening. My father's voice trembled. "Son, don't do this." I let out a shaky breath. "You already did it when you chose him." "Over the truth," I replied, my chest burning with a bittersweet clarity. My phone buzzed again. A follow-up message from the compliance team confirming the investigation's progress and requesting my cooperation. The air felt electric, thick with consequences and realization. My brother sank onto the couch, covering his face, his voice muffled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never thought I'd lose everything." I watched him, feeling no triumph, only the sharp truth of justice reclaiming its space. For the first time, I stepped back instead of toward him. "I lost everything long before you did," I said quietly. "The difference is, I rebuilt myself in the dark." My mother's eyes brimmed with tears. "We didn't know how to fix this," she murmured. I swallowed the ache in my throat. "You weren't trying to fix it. You were trying to erase me." Outside, rain kissed the windows, the scent of wet earth drifting in through a cracked frame, cool and cleansing. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. My brother's voice followed, faint and pleading. "Where are you going?" I paused, the handle cold against my palm. "Somewhere I'm finally valued," I answered, without looking back as I stepped into the night air. The storm no longer felt heavy, just honest, and while the silence behind me still echoed with everything I'd survived, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the first breath of the life I chose for myself.